Should I use this too? Okay. Hello everyone. We are talking about the garment industry in Bangladesh. For this presentation, we wanted to focus on the workers' situation there in the garment industry. So we are focusing on 5 problems that we found there regarding inequality. And so we are going to see, for example, inequality between workers and big companies, and also regarding environmental issues. And so that's our work for today. Okay, for the issue here, as we have seen during class, okay, the Rana Plaza in April of 2013 has collapsed. The main thing here, of course, was that so many people died, like 1,100. Actually, was 1,137 people. And the day before that, workers could see how the building was cracking, and they were seeing some fails there. So on the day of the collapse, thanks. They didn't want to enter the building, but managers forced them to go in, and okay, that happened. So next slide. Here, okay, we have the garment industry in Bangladesh that represents actually a little more than 75% of total exports, and it represents around 13% of the GDP of the country. So for the government, it's really important. Among the main importers of these garments, we have the EU, US, Canada, and among others, we have Japan, Turkey, Australia, and New Zealand. For example, for this chart that it was in 2012, right? The total of billions exported in just garment industry was 20 billions. And in this chart, it was included in the EU. It was before the Brexit. So it was included UK, just to make it clear. Because the main importer there is Germany, actually. So, okay. We are giving this information just to make sure that we are clear with our policies after that. Because, for example, this happened last year in December. These protests began when, for example, the last labor act that was made was in 2006, right? And was established the minimum wage that we are going to talk about that later. But the thing here is the inquiry has been made, and the average of wages was $67 per month per worker in average, and the World Bank line poverty was in $180 per month. So it was around the half of what was needed to don't be poor. And so what happened? They went into a strike. This showed how labor unions were weak and still are weak, because the government arrested them, union leaders, they fired workers, they repressed them, and they took a policy about zero tolerance with these kind of things, because they wanted to make sure that the country is meeting the market expectations. So this also, another thing important here about labor unions are weak, it's that, for example, the biggest labor union, it's just 5% of the workers in the garment industry, and the garment industry is counting now with more than 3.6 million workers. So it's a lot of people. Okay, regards big companies, here we took this image from H&M.com in the US. With this we wanted to show, for example, how they are selling clothes for example, this swimwear, this is from this year. It's just $5. And so the companies, what they are trying to do is just to sell clothes cheaper and cheaper for the consumers, because that's what consumers want. That's what we want too. But the thing is that everything that they sell has a cost. So for them, it's really important how much the labor costs. And that is connected also directly to Bangladesh, because this is from H&M that works with Bangladesh garments. And if you can read in the bottom part, it says that up to 70% off. So it's like a lot cheaper than that. It's making no sense. And the average of clothes sold in H&M, the page, is like around $20 and $30. So if we discount the 70%, it will be like, I don't know, $5 or
$1.05.
yes, something like that. So it's crazy. And we are comparing this photo. Another thing that I forgot, for example, the image. The image shows a girl that it's not related, like physically, to Bangladesh people. So we can tell from this image that the aim of consumers is to another countries like US or the European Union. And in this side of the slide, we put this to show, for example, we checked in Forbes, right? And the top five companies in regards sales in US billion in this year are these five, but we took the top five that works in Bangladesh, with Bangladesh, because there were another ones like in between. For example, the first one was Apple, but Apple is not working in Bangladesh. And we wanted to show, for example, Walmart, right? Walmart sales are considered to be like 326.3 US billion. So we are comparing, for example, how much money they have with the price that they sell their clothes. For example, H&M is 21.6 billion, and how the workers are paid, that is like, as I said, $67 per month. And another thing that I didn't mention, it's like 85% of workers are women, so this is important too. And a lot of children work there too. And so in the upper part we have Alliance and Accord. These are two groups of these different companies that work in Bangladesh. So what happened? They made these two groups with different treaties just to ensure the worker situation and conditions there. But for example, what they want to do is the government to take care of the situation, because among the policies that they have made, an inquiry made by the Guardian, the journal, they have said that, for example, in the policy that they had, these two groups, for example, they don't have proper fire security measurements. They don't have like escape exits. For example, Walmart had like 40% of the arrangement made, but the other 60% was missing. And also, the sweatshop that works for this company in Bangladesh, they are not owned directly by them. So the government also needs to do something about it. And for this, that's it. Another thing, sorry. For example, here the graph shows Zara, right, with 17.2 billion sales. But Zara belongs to Intex, so actually that's more. So it didn't show on Forbes, but it's more than that. Yeah, thanks. Okay, so I'm going just to mention the 5 problems that we found here in the industry. Okay, first one is low and disproportional wages, lack of education and weak trade unions. For example, the demonstration that happened last year, and poor infrastructure condition, like, okay, Rana Plaza collapsed, environmental concerns, and healthcare. I'm just going to mention it now because we are going to explain during the policies. So our question would be that what can be done to reduce inequality? So we have the government, we have the big companies, and we have the workers. the companies that have a lot of money, that are, for example, they have the headquarters in US or in the European Union. And then we have the government in Bangladesh that wants to meet the expectations of the market and the big companies. And it's also competing with different countries that works with the government too. And besides that, we have the workers that are paying the conditions and the bad conditions.
Okay, so for the goals and strategies, when we're thinking about that, we would ask ourselves which policies can be considered ethically correct to improve the working conditions in Bangladesh, and how can this reduce the inequality between the company and the workers. And when we're thinking about this, we thought the working condition is representing the inequality in Bangladesh the most. For example, from the movie we watched, The True Cost, we saw that the houses or the workplace the factory owners live and the workers live is really different. And also the workers didn't have any opportunity to learn about how to claim their rights when they're working. So we have to reduce inequality and give more rights to the workers. But then, since this is about the country's problem, so we also have to think about how to enhance economic growth for the company. For the country. So for the policies we're going to give after that, we will include all the three at the bottom: the reducing inequality, and the rights, and also economic growth.
Okay, so first policy that we suggest is the training program for the training program by the government. And what we think is the main problem is providing a safe environment for the workers to avoid such incident as the Rana Plaza. And right now, after the incident, there are many inspections done from outside the country. So by the aid from outside the country, the factories in Bangladesh are going through inspections. But in order for the government to have a sustainable development within the country, we need that the government has to take part in that. And so what we suggest is the training program that seeks to raise professionals for the safety measures in factories in Bangladesh. And these trainees will inspect and conduct reports within the factory so that they can give advices or guidelines to the factories. And Ramiro had said before that the Alliance for Bangladesh Worker Safety, it's a commitment. It was a 5-year commitment from 2013. So as long as they don't extend the length, then it's going to end in 2018. So we believe that the government there has to be a transition to the government's, the organization supported by the government. And by solving the issues of the safety measures within the country, the factories, we believe that we can shorten the inequality gap between the workers and the employers, because the workers then don't have to risk their lives to work to get money. And the second policy that we suggest is the implementation of the recycling process. And so we believe that the inequality can be caused by the environmental issues too, because the workers are suffering from health diseases that are caused by environmental problems. And on the other hand, the consumers or the manufacturers that doesn't live near the factories, they don't have the direct environmental, or they don't have the physical influence by the environmental issues. So we believe that we have to solve the environmental issues too. And we were thinking of what the main issue right now in Bangladesh is: the lack of the National Effluent Quality Standards, which regulates the amount of pollutants released in the water. and we can regulate the amounts of pollutants released in the water. That is also another solution that we can do, but we believe that the government will not be supportive to this idea, because then the government will think that by reducing the amount of pollutants will lead to the amount of the decrease in the amount of exports that they can have. So what we suggest is the recycling process, whereas instead right now there are tons of millions of unused textile that is thrown out. So, and that by using the recycling process, we'll reuse the thrown out textiles to reuse them again. And this has two merits, where usually the textiles that are no longer used, they need to provide a landfill where they throw out all these materials and use it as landfill. But we can reduce that amount, and also we don't have to use new color dyes to color new textiles. We can reuse the colored ones again one more time, so we can reduce the amount of color dyes that is released in the water as well. And the third policy that we suggest is making use of the Labor Day. And right now, after the incident, May 1st is known as the official holiday in Bangladesh, and it's a Labor Day that day. And in this day, many organizations and the labor unions, they hold like pageants to teach the workers the fairness of working. So we can make use of that day. Usually this day they teach the fairness of working as well, and the workers, they do like protests. But we're thinking of working together with the National Garment Workers Federation. And this, one of the missions that they raise is to teach the workers skills needed to work in the factories. And what we think is teaching them actually is not the actual skill that they need for working. What we suggest is the working conditions or the rights that they have, or about labor union. So we have the national guidelines made by the United Nations, but if the workers don't actually know about the guidelines, then there is no legal coercion for the guidelines made by the UN. So the employers can exploit the workers as long as like however they want, if the workers don't actually protest. So what we need is the awareness for the by the workers that they have these kinds of rights. They have these kinds of minimum wages that's protected. So we were thinking of setting up a booth where the workers the organization will teach the workers the necessary, like the fairness of working. And by teaching them, this will lead to solving the inequality gap, because there is right now a gap between the employers or the consumers and the workers in means of the knowledge that they have about the labor union. So if there are more awareness for the workers, then we can reduce that gap.
And the fourth policy is going to be about the labor laws, because labor law in Bangladesh is not adequate, especially the minimum wage. Because looking at this chart, this is from 2012, comparing the garment industry among 3 developing countries, and look at the very bottom part. And comparing the 3 countries, Bangladesh has the lowest minimum wage, and this $39 is actually far lower than the estimated living wage that the ILO or the World Bank shows. So we think we have to hire the minimum wage in order to reduce the inequality between the workers and the owners. But we know that it's very hard to say just hire immediately. So what we suggest is to change the frequency of adjustment to from every 5 years to annual, because as you can see, other two countries are changing the law annually, whereas Bangladesh is only changing it every 5 years. So we suggest to change it to annual so that they can gradually, step by step, higher the minimum wage, and then for the first goal to reach the estimated living wage, so that the workers would be able to consume more and won't have to worry about getting disease or being sick, so that if they consume more, the economy will be enhanced much more. So the government will be able to achieve both reducing inequality and enhancing economic growth.
I'll try to be fast because we don't have much time. But the policy number 5 we thought about was regards healthcare, because I think I didn't mention it before in the issue, but the last labor act that was made in Bangladesh was I mentioned it in 2006. So we are now in 2017 and there weren't changes at all. So I'll try to explain we are trying to focus on a progressive development as in the other 4 policies, but from the bottom to the top, our goal would be to ensure dignity for them, right? So in the long term, we suggest a mandatory health insurance for everyone. That's what I think it's a basic need for everyone, the right. So we know that that's in the long term, the government has enough money to achieve that. So in the short term, in Bangladesh, for example, per factory are like 3,000 workers. So we suggest, for example, divide it between the government and the big companies, just to guarantee 1 doctor per factory, because in this last labor act that was made in 2006, in one part said that regards healthcare, they could apply for a doctor, but they need to fill a form to the owners of the management, the owners of the factories and the management, and they could have a reply within 3 work days. So let's suppose that something happens on a Friday. They could have a reply by next week, Wednesday. So if we have an urgency, that can be something bad. So for the beginning, we will suggest just to guarantee 1 doctor per factory. And in the long term, just a mandatory health insurance when they have more money to do that.
To sum up, our policies are the 5 that you see on the left side, and then it seems that it's really difficult to achieve all those at the same time. But then from the graph you see on the right side, we can see that the garment industry is really growing, and in 2013, only garment industry is earning $25 billion. So we think the country has enough resource to help to achieve step by step of each of those 5. And along future, we think it is possible to achieve all those 5 and then reduce the inequality among companies and the workers. Thank you.
So, any comments? Yeah.
One question about thank you for the presentation. I think it's very good. I have a question about the implementing. What kind of obstacles do you think you face when implementing these policies, and how do you think you can actually overcome the
I think one of the main issues is the financial problems, because in order to put all these together, we need money, and the government is not probably want to spend all the money to implement all these policies. But if we look at it in the long term, if we look at it in the short term, the government has to pay all this money. But in order to, for example, the environmental problems, the cost of the solving the environment, right now they are not facing that much of a problem right now. I guess they think, but they have to pay for health insurance for the people who live around that area, or they have all these influences, these effects, but it's not included in the cost right now. So if we think of it as an investment, So right now, the Alliance, they're also having the group, the organization, the 5-year commitment organization, they have the investment program where they ask the local banks to invest the money. And that's for the safety measurements, but we can do the same thing for the environmental problems too, or other health insurance or minimum wages. Ask the government for the introduction and implementation of investment, so they can use that money to try to make the environments better for the factories. And then if they are able to, because our policies are supposed to solve the problems, but at the same time tries to maintain the sustainable development. So if the government are able to have the same amount of GDP, then they will be able to have return all the money back. So the investment, financial problems is one of the problems that we're facing, but we can solve that by investment from outside the country and also within the country, the government.
Yeah, I want to add something, because here we have shown the exports of garments and exports in general, but the imports actually are bigger than exports. So the growing is kind of going down. So the problem is financial. So maybe they can ask, for example, big companies to do, for example, we suggested doctor per factory, right? They don't own all the factories, but at least the government can ask for them to, with all the money they have. For example, if we consider in one building just 3,000 people working, maybe one more employee, a doctor, that is nothing to them. I think maybe the government should ask for the companies to pay for that.
For the recycling process, most consumers don't want to buy reused clothes. What do you think is another suggestion? How we have a safe and shop? Does any company recycle clothes?
Actually, it's not the recycle, the used clothes that they're throwing out. It's the clothes that they, during the process, that is no longer used. So it's not the clothes that they've sold, then somebody used it, and then
it's like pieces of fabric.
Yeah.
I have 3 points. One is the factual errors that labor law has been revised in 2014. So your data up to 2013 when the run-up occurred. So maybe you didn't trace back to 2014. You have to incorporate that. But the people weren't happy with the content of labor law. There's a number of labor unions increased, but their effectiveness wasn't strong enough. So the government did attempt it, but how effective that was, that's another story. That's one. And secondly, the government, you're talking about the government role, what government can do to reduce inequality. What is your policy option for government, right? So government can do whatever they can do on reducing inequality. You mentioned inequality, your goals and strategies is ethically correct, incorrect, ethical. And I wonder whether this continues economically too, will it be sustainable? Maybe not. And because the cost to environment, cost to people, cost to a lot of other things is not, there's no trend or policy set by government is not being, introducing any measures to rectify that. So I would even think about whether it is ethically unequal. That means morally unequal, but physically, because they're making poor wages, and you see sales, huge sales, wages very low. So you have to define inequality. What is inequality? Because there are living wages and PPP, purchasing power parity. So you can't just compare 60 bucks in Bangladesh and 60 bucks in US. 60 bucks in Bangladesh in PPPY, the price is very low. This may worth twice or three times more than that 60 bucks in US, because you can get things cheaper, right? So the simply living cost, that means in cheaper country, costs are cheaper in Bangladesh. But in absolute terms, it looks as if Bangladesh is so poor and they are exploited. But you've got to start thinking a little bit about the purchasing power parity and living wages. In the United States of America, if you get 1,000 bucks, you still have a lot of problems. You are poor if you get 1,000 bucks. In Bangladesh, 1,000 baht, you're rich. Yeah? You can live like a rich man in the US. So that you have to think about it.
Actually,
and
sorry.
Yeah.
In one part, we have found that the World Bank said that the poverty line in Bangladesh was like $180 per month, and they were getting average 67 by this increase that the Guardian made. So it was kind of the half of below the poverty line.
Okay, so that 50 bucks is 180 is
The poverty line.
Is a poverty line. Yeah, poverty.
According to the World Bank.
According to the World Bank. Yeah, poverty line is what? $3 a month or something like that. I don't know the definition of that, but what I wanted to say is you compare the total sales of 350 something billion dollars of Walmart and the 60 bucks of minimum wages. Sales, 360 something sales of Walmart probably is a worldwide, global sales. It can't be 300 only for Bangladesh. Bangladesh exports only 35, 25, the time that now most likely around 30. So you can't just simply compare. So your comparison was a bit, I don't know, it's a bit weak. So you have to see that one of the ways that you're contributing, interesting things, is the work you put, how much you contributed to the production. So workers, Walmart had a lot of investment. They have design, they have infrastructure. So capital has a good return. You have a capital. So if you have some return from the capital, that's fair because you have a capital. Now why Bangladesh doesn't have a capital? Why US have a capital? Is there maybe unfairness there? And will it be able to, Bangladesh will be able to overcome these differences in capital accumulation? So this is the systemic sort of, but you keep adding intellectual properties and that brings return to US. Bangladesh will have a long way to go before they come up with intellectual property because design, education, everything is not ready. So your comparison of definition of inequality and the comparison and evidence that they are unequal, I thought that was a bit fragile, a bit weak, But working condition, yes, working condition is very poor. And Alliance and the Accord did that for safety. They didn't do much on others. They did on safety. There was a Tasnim fire before the Ramadan, and they did work on that too. So, you have to, I think the definition of inequality, you have to revisit perhaps. And then the evidence is to show that inequality need to work out. Bangladesh government get tax out of it, but they do a lot of expenditure. But gains from export, 30 or 25 to 30 million bucks, is to manufacturers. They get the money, 30 million bucks every year. And what percentage goes to Bangladesh, to government? 10% as tax, as a corporate tax. The corporate tax is not charged against the total sales, but for, and that is, the government doesn't have that much money, I don't think. But they have a regulation. They have a regulation to make, for example, you're suggesting inequality between manufacturers and workers. So manufacturers getting perhaps enough money. Maybe they are the richest. compared to workers, government, and manufacturers. So government can do to help manufacturers. Could you like to share some of your profit with workers? Now, when you're sharing, what are the criteria why you are sharing? The manufacturer says, I don't need to share. They're getting $60. They didn't used to get anything. Our poverty line is 160. And some of them, 50% get more than 160. So they're okay. No job, they get a job, they reach the poverty line. So what's wrong with it, you know? We have a capital, we have a land, we have machine input, therefore we're getting a lot of money. But I think one thing you mentioned, quite interestingly, is the contribution workers has made to production. And the minimum wage is not adjusted. Adjusted according to what criteria? Just has to put up because ethically not correct, because Walmart is getting that much and they're getting $60. You have to come up with that criteria why this is now unequal. Why $60 to 160 is not enough. One suggestion is manufacturers probably getting you more. So, you know, you have the Walmart, manufacturers, and workers. Now, inequality is a system, current system of capital accumulation and differences, and the Bangladesh is catching up. And the Bangladesh government trying to focus on getting more money, so the Bangladesh economy will grow. So they may pay a little less attention to workers' condition, not knowing, not for the ethical reasons, but if they don't invest in human being, maybe the gain from economy may scale down in the future. There's some suggestion.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? How this team can improve? I've got two. I think thank you for the fine presentation. On top of what Professor Ramoto said, I think some technical and factual issues. I have two comments about the framework of your presentation, and that probably has to do with your paper. First is, I cannot agree more on Professor Ramoto, your definition of inequality. Very little sort of mention of inequality. In what forms are you talking about inequality within Bangladesh or its relationship with companies operating in Bangladesh? And I get the sense that you're referring to the latter, Bangladesh and other companies. But you probably need to define clearly what sort of aspect of inequality your paper is actually working on. And that relates to the second point, which is improving poor working conditions. I think poor working condition is one manifestation of inequality, and I think you're talking about wages, low wages. Then it might be a good idea to approach this question like, why do workers have to work in such poor working conditions? What sort of forces Bangladesh people to work, especially you talk about women and children? What sort of structural conditions? I think you probably then incorporate a number of theories and concepts we studied in the first half of the class, which is Bangladesh located in the global economy makes it so hard for the government to actually implement all of these wonderful things you have actually come up with, recommendation policies, improving wages, taking care of the health of the workers. But these things have to be sacrificed for the sake of capital accumulation, particularly in manufacturing. So the transition from agriculture society to manufacturing society, right? They have to accumulate capital in agriculture and use that for manufacturing, and then gradually move out to sort of the, move to up to the core or semi-core, right? Dependency sort of the relationship. So I think you probably need to maybe a little bit spend time on discussing why Bangladesh has to, right, take on some difficult situations in its process to becoming a manufacturing country, right? So these two issues, broadly speaking, I think you probably need to work on more. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation, and I really like the compositions and like how you explained. And then I have one point regarding the government's attitude towards the TNCs, for example, brands. So you mainly mentioned about like how to improve, like you were focusing. I think you were focusing more on the workers' condition, and then I think that one of the few of the factors that were exploiting the workers were also influenced by the TNCs, so the brands. So we were pressuring them to produce products to the deadline, and then we were like given this like impossible amount, like just like giving this like small amount of money and then making them do the work. So I was just wondering like what kind of attitude that government will hold with these policies as well. It's just because it was only focused on workers, but if it's your main focus, and I don't really mind it, but I was just wondering if you were considering about that aspect too. I was clear.
Sorry, can you say that again?
Okay.
What will the government do with those kind of, for example, big companies that give
Yes,
just
along with these policies, will government also have another policy for the TNCs as well?
TNCs? I mean that everything needs to be included because, as Professor said, the government is the one that actually decides what is happening, what is not happening there. So we didn't think particularly on that, but for example, on the healthcare, I would say that because of the financial problem that they have, maybe they need to make, for example, a policy for them to pay that and not the government. Or for example, regulate some aspects that the money comes from them, but something that doesn't represent such a big thing for them to complain about it. Because if we, as we saw in the policy that she explained about the minimum wages, for example, Bangladesh is the lowest one. So if we just add a little more of cost, it wouldn't be such a big thing for them regarding the other countries' wages, I think.
I like your thing on living wages and minimum wages, Minimum wages have been adjusted in the past, but not adjusted frequently enough. So their workers' contribution has been rising, waging stagnating, and gaps widening. Okay, and that's the actual wages. But when you say living wages or wages, for example, if you get the free health care in a factory by a doctor, that's part of the minimum wages. If you get some education grant, that's minimum wages, And so definition of minimum wages, because you get a bit confused. You see living, poverty line, living wages, and wages. So you have to say in terms of equality, simple equality. What are the wages that constitute? you mentioned healthcare, labor law, and working. If a labor law says that you got 5 days a month for holiday, so that the father or mother can spend some time with children and teach them, help them for education and schoolwork and all that. That's also holiday, but part of the minimum wages, So definition of minimum wages, I think it's important to define, because this is where government can really intervene, increasing the minimum wages, because nowadays government, who decides minimum wages nowadays in the whole Southeast Asian countries? Government. Government in consultation with a number of people. They just decide like that, And so government can have a very important role in setting up a minimum wage. I see among all this unfairness in minimum wages, But if TNC transnational corporation get the pressure, government likes it. That means more money, more work. But if manufacturers try to exploit, get them to work instead of 10 hours that they work for 20 hours, that's going to be a big problem. That's working hours, and they get the same pay. So, government role in TNC, transnational corporation, in order to look at the whole package of activity to make it effective, then you have to think this 5 section is good enough or not. 5 interventions, to reduce inequality. Anyway, thank you.
Any more comment? Okay, well, let's give them a big round of applause. Okay, and second presentation.
Hello, everyone. Our presentation will be about the government case study, and so this is the agenda for today: introduction, objectives, new policies, event activities, limitations, conclusion on what we see in 5 years, and the references. So for the introduction, we realized that the emergence of global value chains, which consist of companies operating in different countries from the start of the production to the finished products, has contributed to inequality in the world. And from here, we would like to focus the human inequality as a result of the chains that has contributed to inequality in the forms of workers, especially who is the lowest in the spectrum of the global chains in their working conditions and low wages. And so the focus would be on the Bangladesh government industry, and we realized that one of the reasons that has contributed to this inequality is the low wages and the unequal distribution of the profits. And from here you can see that the clothing expenditures as a share of disposable income for Americans has decreased dramatically, while in this slide, in this figure, you can see that Americans buy a lot more clothes than ever before, and it's been increasing. So this means that the price of the clothes has been decreased dramatically in spite them buying more. And while there are statements that the workers get low wages because they do not work, they do not contribute to the increase in productions and stuff. But this figure shows that while the labor productivity increases, the wages doesn't follow the increase of the labor productivity. And from this one, you can see, especially in Bangladesh, where we would focus on the indirect labor, and the direct labor here is the lowest in the overall cost of the t-shirt products. And for now, we would focus on the incident of the Rana Plaza. We would imagine ourselves as the head of the company, the J&J company, which is one of the company where its clothes has been found in the collapse of the Rana Plaza that has caused a lot of lives of the labor workers. So J&J is partially in fault here because we outsource the manufacturers who is operating in the Rana Plaza buildings. And by looking in the perspectives of the J&J CEO, who was widely criticized by the media and the world because they was partially in fault, our decisions in continuing to stay in Bangladesh and our policies and goals and activities to achieve that would be then explained in the later on.
So now this brings us to the research question. So how can the income wage inequality in Bangladesh garment industry can be alleviated through the policy making as a result of Rana Plaza incident? So this income wage inequality is not limited to the monetary value. So this is also including what workers deserve in their daily life. Okay. So overview of JJ company is shown here, and then we have contract with over 300 Bangladesh manufacturers, and then other retail stores will include H&M, Walmart, Tesco, and so on. So we are one of them. And then here is our objectives of continuing to stay and committing to the relationship of the factories in Bangladesh. So first, the first motive is like we have a big economic presence in Bangladesh, as mentioned earlier. So we have 300 companies that we do business with, and then it is impossible for us to cut the ties with them one night and then start moving on to other country. And then this will also create the trust issues to the stakeholders as well as the countries that we are going to hold contracts with. So this will give the invisible barrier for the J&J to move on to another countries. And then if this kind of incident like Rana Plaza happens, then we have no control over moving to other country or remaining, because we have already that means that we already forfeited the battle we had before. So that is the trust issue. And then we have the merits of staying in Bangladesh because Bangladesh have the highest productivity among other producers, and also they are flexible in creating small amounts of productions as well. And then by having this, our objectives, so this is, we will have to invest so much money in the following policies and activities. However, we are considering this as an investment to the future, so that we will not have the big loss in the end. Okay, so now we are moving on to the new policy.
So in order to practice the objectives, then we made this new policy that includes 7 activities that would help alleviate the problems of inequality in the workplace and workers' exploitation. So for the first policy,
and here briefly the 7 activities, which would be explained later. The first activity here is educating the suppliers, because we realize that J&J do not own the labor workers directly. So what we do is we would come up with negotiations and so documents that we would negotiate with the manufacturers for them to agree and comply with these rules, for them to do business with us, J&J. And for the first one, educating the code of conduct. So we follow GAP's code of vendor conduct, which is created to protect to comply the rules in the area of laws, environment, labor, health, safety, and healthcare, which would later stress in the area of foreign contract, also forced labor, working hours, payment, wages, and the benefits of the workers. And so, as we have said, the suppliers or the manufacturers must follow these rules to be able to do business with J&J. And also the other area is we would educate them on the benefits of keeping or satisfying the workers, which would later increase in the production and their loyalties to their work, and also decrease the possibility in working strikes, which would later stagnate the productivity of the manufacturers.
Since the accident that happened in Rana Plaza was one of the most well-known that happened in the garment industry, we wanted to prevent this from happening to our future factories and to our factories. So for the second one, the thorough inspection of factory work environment, this is what we're doing. So first, a brief history about Rana Plaza's building structure. The main reason that that led to its collapse was because of the weak base it had. It was actually built under a pond with garbage that was just disposed because it was in Bangladesh. And there were the floors were also originally 5 floors, the building, but they illegally made 3 more floors on top of it, and then they placed machineries and other equipments that were too heavy for the building. And they also used used second-hand construction tools for the structure, which made the building very, very fragile. And also for the interior of the building, of course, the poor work environment, such as no ventilation and many people getting injured. So in order for us to prevent those from happening, we made a solution with a mission to protect the safety of the workers and the construction of the building. So there's 6 steps for this activity right here. First is the confirmation of the construction parts. So we have to make sure that the structure of the building will be strong enough for the factories. Next will be putting emergency exits just in case the worst event happens, so people could go out safely. And then, of course, a rearrangement of the machineries and equipment to make sure that the efficiency of the production of the garments are in its full potential. And then installing emergency exits, signs, emergency tools, and first aid kits, fire alarm. And then next are wirings, so make sure nobody trips. And then regular inspection, which is done by the OSHA types agency that we are going to establish. OSHA, there's a lot of agencies that are already being practiced in Bangladesh, but in our case we chose to base ours on OSHA, or Occupational Safety and Health Administration, that's very, very common in the US. So for the next training of the workers, for this one, we also are going to implement OSHA standards where proper training regarding the use and maintenance of machineries. So we're going to teach workers how to properly use machines and to properly use emergency training. So there's going to be escape drills, and there's going to be teaching them how to use first aid as well. And of course, our agency will also track records of illnesses, injuries, and properties to prevent future accidents from happening. Yeah. So for the fourth one, encouraging labor union with mutually accepted agreements. So for this one, since Bangladesh is very, it's very common for Bangladesh to have labor unions, and all of these labor unions are abused. So for us to, in our case, what we did is we're gonna make this official labor union that our company would be partner or sponsored with. But the main goal of this is to have a monthly meeting where compensations can be made.
The sixth activity is publication of labor union activities and agreements. So we try to think about like how to make it long lasting. So we cannot just come up with a policy and activities and then just drop it. And then, so in order to have the stakeholders as well as the workers informed that we are acting towards this problem, that we would like to have this, we would like to attract media so that
we are self-enforcing us to publicate the informations. And then by having more attention, then we can draw more interest from the international brands, other brands, and also the government of Bangladesh and other stakeholders, and then which might, or will hopefully, which will also attract them to supply funding or time and their efforts to work on this issue. Also, we will also show that we are being visible and transparent to the stakeholders as well. So by having this kind of media attraction, we have some demerit, which is we will have to give a big pressure to the manufacturer to show significant change in a short amount of time. That will be hard, but we need a big pressure. It is necessary for us to make a change because the exploitation has been at its peak at the Rana Plaza incident. So that's why we are pressuring them. And then sixth activity is to have annual TNC conference regarding garment industry exploitation in Bangladesh. So as of now, there are many other conferences held by Bangladesh government as well as the garment industry. However, this TNC conference is different in a sense that we will only include the TNCs, so brands, and then we will be talking about the activities that we have done throughout the year about the alleviation of this exploitation problem. Why are we doing this? It is to have the feasible option. So we are offering each other the feasible option to alleviate the inequality exploitation. And then by having the different ideas, we hope to come up with the brand new idea that includes the whole good ideas together. So this is different than the other summits that are held.
Seventh one is pressuring the Bangladesh government to further support the rights of garment workers, because we realize that we are only a company, an international company, by which the person or the group of people who have the authority to regulate rules in regards to more protection of the labor workers or the government. And so there are many ways that we can pressure the government, and one of them it's like H&M and Zara who pressured the government by not attending conference of Bangladesh Garment Manufacturers and Exporters Association, and by not attending one of the most important associations. If you're one of the company who is operating in the garment industry in Bangladesh, that would be quite a big deal. And because the H&M didn't attend the association because the government has arrested garment workers who were protecting for their own rights. So H&M didn't think it was right for the government to also arrest the workers, so they didn't attend. And by that, it was to signal the government that H&M is not satisfied with what they're doing, and it might lead to H&M later withdrawing from doing business or something. And that would lead the government to further realize that H&M is also one of the most important companies in that would increase the GDP of the Bangladesh. And also, so like H&M, U.S. government has also pressured the Bangladesh government by saying that they would not do business with Bangladesh if they do not create new labor law, which they did later on in 2013 as a response from that pressure. And also, we realized that the Bangladesh garment workers has already got a possible of 77% rise because of the political unrest, and by supporting that political unrest, this might increase in the percentage or possibility of the increase in their income as well.
So here are some of the limitations that we face. So we're only a foreign company, so we cannot really interrogate the domestic issues. And the second is we are still a profit-seeking company, so we cannot invest the whole profit that we would make into the alleviation. But then we will still work for that because it's an investment for the future. And then third is JJ is only one corporation out of hundreds of all the other corporations. So that's why we are doing publications and whatnot to influence others and pressure the government as well. And then fourth, we don't have any authority in lawmaking. And then fifth, we don't have accurate method of recording the outcomes in the future.
So for our conclusion, what we predict that will happen and what we see in 5 years are the decrease of the injury rates in the workplace, a living wage, at least 50% of manufacturers operate under J&J practice OSHA procedures, and then also an increase in governmental protection on the garment workers. Yes. Oh.
So disclaimer is that J&J is a fictional company that we used for this case study, so you will not find any information on this company even if you go online. So we got this information from this material.
Thank you. Comments? Yes.
I think the proposal is very good in terms of expanding your resources, because I think you try to include the resources from other people like media or suppliers, maybe basically one of your people, but also the other entities. So in terms of the expanding your resources, I think was a really good idea. So one thing is that I think you can also articulate the benefits for those people who try to include the proposal. For example, what is the benefit for media, for instance, to get involved in your, I think, proposals, for instance, something like that.
Thank you.
Yes. But realistic, some of them are very feasible. And I have a couple of points. One is the crucial point of distribution of value added through the global value chain. How do you distribute? So poor working conditions, poor wages, it's a late start. Developing countries late start. And then say, oh, there will be a chance for everyone. Look at India and China. They say that, you see. But from the low country who have suffered from what is called mid-income trap. You go to a certain level, after that, you can't really overcome the mid-income trap. And you stay for cheap labor and raise to the bottom. And the value addition there you get from the value creation is very little. What's the chance for Bangladesh is a late starter? It's doing okay, but would it be able to overcome this inequality that is wages and productivity? Not just wages, because you can't just increase wages if you don't contribute for larger production, you know. And designer in New York, they contribute a lot. It's an intellectual property. For workers, just not even much skills, the simple labor. So input into training, as the previous group has said, it is in a sense that investment to improve the inequality. Inequality that is late starters get less, early starters get more. So it's not just late and early. However, something, somebody kick-started industrial revolution from UK to Boston, all this acceleration of wealth and all that. So I would be happy if we could give this late starter the structural issues of late starter is illegal. But of course, India, China, they overcome. But will Bangladesh be able to overcome? What is the JJ contribution to that? And one of the key elements is JJ is just one company, one brand, and there are a lot. So the feasibility and of the JJ integration really depends how JJ can mobilize the rest of the transnational corporations, brands. And your suggestions of summit for brands, that's quite interesting, or quite innovative, because the brands, government inviting the transnational brands to a summit every year. And this time, transnational corporation wasn't happy, some of them, so they boycotted. feasibility of transnational corporation getting together once a year? I don't know. Because it's only a few companies, several companies who boycott it. They are the leaders. There are a whole lot who is not a leader. And finally, Bangladesh, after Rana Plaza, production exported, rising, keep on rising, and they may reach 50 billion in 2020. And only group which has moved out is Turkey. And maybe there are a few more which smaller we didn't notice. But basically, they think Bangladesh is so attractive. Low wages, diligent workers, and huge working companies and all that. But there's a rampant inequality in terms of the wages and returns, But again, like I mentioned from the earlier group, you have to define what are these, living wages inequality. So the distribution of value created all throughout the chain. Cotton producers, they create values, they get less. Cotton producers. And workers, they spend 10 hours, sometimes 15 hours, and they get less. So it's not work, it's not a labor. It's something else. It's something else. And JJ has something else. And JJ, government wants JJ to stay. And the JJ is a leader among all this group. And the government recognizes the role of JJ, and again may listen to the JJ and the group of workers. So your suggestion in terms of how the JJ and NKN can mobilize the rest and organize a TNC, the Transnational Corporation Summit, is a very good idea, but I would like to see that approaches and strategy, how you organize it. The government is going to say, they are very strong and stern about protecting their manufacturers, protecting their profit, protecting their position, protecting their, and workers' position is secondary to some large extent. How would they say, if they increase wages, maybe it's a peanuts. I don't know. You have to prove increasing a bit of share of the workers. Does it hurt profit of the manufacturers? I don't think so. It's just another small amount. But the image of Bangladesh, cheap labor, cheap cost, and low profit. Transparency. I think transparency is so important. It's transparency. I thought you hit the point. But I'd like to see how you're going to work on it. There are transparency organizations around the world. GRI, SEDEX, and probably explore how, because within the country, transparency wouldn't work. Because the media and government, they try to suppress it. So transparency. And the government, manufacturers are not, company limited. They don't have to disclose information. So they don't have to be transparent. So these little elements count a lot. But overall, I was very interested, very thrilled to listen to your presentation. Thank you very much.
My comment is, I think it was shared with the other group. That is, why is it that the focus of inequality that your group has taken actually emerged? I mean, the research question has to do with how does global inequality, how does inequality manifest itself? But at the same time, both, I think your group and this group need to give an answer to why. Also the why question, why this inequality emerged in the way that you have actually framed in this presentation. And you have actually pointed out very interesting and important factor, which you can go back to productivity and wages. So productivity actually increased, but wages stagnated. this is a dilemma. This is a very important question I think you are raising, and this actually points to the inequality part of the global value chain. So you also mentioned uneven distribution of benefits of the global value chain, particularly in government. One part takes a lion's share of benefits, and the rest sort of have to suffer. So inequality emerges because of this uneven distribution of benefits embedded in the global value chain patterns of production. So international trade is one aspect of the engine of inequality creation. But it's not just about trade, where we discussed the core imports raw materials and turn them into value-added goods. This is the sort of traditional way of producing inequality, according to dependency theory. But the new sort of aspects, the new sort of mechanism of producing inequality is the global value chain, in which certain sectors take the lion's share of benefits and not returning the benefits back to other areas. So I would actually push you on this point to further investigate why this actually is made possible. Looking at the global value chain and why is this possible is also good to overall, I think your presentation is very professional, clear sort of logic of your argument, and good data supporting it. So I think it's a great job.
Yes, I think we have to attach it with the together
I
with
think we
the
can create a link so the two groups can actually upload.
I think after you revise, after listening to this, it will be good that if you upload the presentation and also the report later on,
So the comments, when would that be, possible for you to actually upload to the Moodle? Would tomorrow deadline would be good, or even tonight? Comments on, everyone today. Yeah, for presentation today. Okay. Yeah, so you probably have taken notes, but you probably need to type it, right? But when do you think you can upload your comments?
right this Sunday.
Okay. Okay. Well, you want to have time.
Yes.
The idea is that the group presented today, two groups, will receive the messages before they produce the final report. So that feeds into your report. And mind you, this group, three of them, they don't have to make comments on your proposal, on your presentation, but other group and all the rest has to make comments.
Yeah, so Rami's group, right? Group making comments on this group, and your group making comments on this group. Okay? So that actually your group two groups work on the same issue, so probably more constructive comments. So let's set the deadline Sunday? Yeah. So your groups can actually, read the comments and incorporate it. Okay, so just 1 minute left for the three groups presenting next week. As you know, time is very compressed, so please prepare a 15-minute presentation. And the transition between groups could be made faster if you have already, set up your presentation beforehand. So we can actually maximize the time. All right, thank you. Good job for the group.